Well, good morning and welcome to this morning's speaker webinar. And this is a first for us, actually. We've been running these webinars for like 4 years now. Kicked them off back in March 2020 during those early days of the pandemic and the lockdowns. And actually, they've proved popular and successful. Covered all sorts of really hot topics since then. But this is a first, and it's a first because bizarrely, it's a second. Because we're actually doing a part two. We did have a really interesting discussion a few weeks ago. In fact, Chloe, my colleague, I think is going to post a link to the collateral from that discussion. But we were looking at Gen Z in the recruitment process. And I had so much positive feedback from people who attended that. And actually, we had so much content, we didn't even get to fit into that first session. We thought we'd do a part two. And in fact, we are actually going to do a part three because I think that we're still focusing really on engaging with Gen Z in the recruitment process. I hear an awful lot from employers that there are also challenges managing Gen Z in the workplace. So actually in November, figured we wait till the next set of cohorts from autumn are kind of in place. But in November, we're going to run a speaker webinar on managing Gen Z and actually interacting with them in the workplace. I think that'll be a really interesting follow-up. But welcome this morning. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us. I think we're going to have another fascinating discussion. And in fact, I think we're going to go big first. I think I'd like to start by handing over to a couple of representatives from one of the global accountancy awarding bodies who will deal with a lot of Gen Z. I'd like to introduce Karen and Joe so they can introduce themselves and they're going to talk through some research actually that they've done recently. So Karen and Joe.
Thank you. Hi, it's lovely to be here. We were at the last session as well, and I think we got a little slot right at the end. Looking forward to the next one, actually, about, I suppose it's how to interact and I guess how to retain Gen Zs as well. But anyway, on the focus of today, just by way of an introduction, I work at ACCA. I'm the Regional Head of Marketing for the UK and EMA. Formerly, I was Head of Business Development and Marketing and Early Careers for the UK. So my interest in early careers kind of stays around. And I'm here with my colleague, Jo, who will introduce herself in a moment when I pass to her. So basically, these are some of the topics we were keen to cover with you today. When I started at ACCA around 5 years ago, it occurred to me that Gen Z was seen as this mysterious bunch that we didn't quite understand, and as they're just one of many stakeholder groups we need to be across, I started to look at ways the organisation could get a little bit closer to them. So one of them was really thinking about ways we could get first-hand input, so really kind of speak to Gen Zs. Those that we had on the payroll were great, but how could we really start to understand those that weren't either connected to ACCA or that we didn't have a direct line to. So I'm going to pass to Jo in a second to talk about that. And then I'll move on to talk about how we've actually flexed our brand and started to really talk to Gen Zs in quite a personal way, and the content strategy we've built around it, and share a little bit of the content that works well with you. So without further ado, I'll pass to my colleague Jo to cover the first piece.
Thank you very much, Karen. So my name's Jo Balfour. I am in ACCA's Central Customer Research and Insights team. So what that means is that I spend a lot of time speaking to our students, so those who are taking the ACCA qualification. But as part of my remit, I'm also doing a lot of research with our education partners as well. So those are the kind of people who support our students along their study journey. So something I've done recently with Karen, and Karen's alluded to it, is getting to this heart of this audience. Gen Z, it's big for ACCA considering our pipeline. So we've got younger students coming through the qualification. And there was a sense of really trying to get a sense of how they're thinking and feeling and getting closer to this group. So what we've ended up doing, and it started off as a germ of an idea, and it's really grown and grown and grown, and it's become this big initiative that we've been running over the last 12 months. But essentially what we wanted to do was build a qualitative research panel So this is a group of people that we could go out to, where we could run a couple of activities with them on a regular basis. And essentially, we've got a roadmap, and the goal we're heading to is where we could essentially build a continuous community. So it would be this ongoing group where we could continually have that engagement. So it's not a one-way conversation, but a two-way conversation where we can ask questions, but then they can also get to know us. And also as a group, they could start building their networks and communities amongst themselves. So what we did last year, essentially, so I think last March, what we did was set up a small community, smallish, I would say, but it was a group of 300 young people. And on this slide, you can see a bit of information around who we targeted, and this is the target audience profile essentially. But we started off with some of the countries where ACCA has a bigger presence, so where we have the bulk of our student base, or those who are taking the ACCA qualification. So that's Hong Kong and mainland China, India, and the UK. And we also wanted to make sure that obviously we would engage our students, so those who are taking an ACCA qualification, but we also wanted to broaden it out and get that outsider perspective. So we made sure that we opened it out to those who have a general interest in finance and accounting. They might be taking other qualifications. It doesn't need to be finance and accounting. They could just have a general interest in it, or want to find out more. But we just wanted to make sure that there was a good range of people involved. So obviously we've got that spectrum of perspectives when we're asking questions. And essentially our goal with this, and you can see that on the far right in terms of some of our high level objectives and how the panel is actually helping ACCA, but we wanted to ensure that we could hear their voice while we were building and testing and delivering products and campaigns designed for them. So we didn't want to second guess what they would want. We just wanted to ask them directly, and they could input into the shaping of that. So through this panel, which, Karen, if you move on to the next slide, I can give you a bit of detail around yes, fantastic. So through this panel, which is essentially custom built for us, we've got support from a qualitative community platform provider, and they've created this environment where it's sort of fully branded. The 300 which we've invited, they live in this area. So every time we launch a new task, and the task can include anything from surveys, content reviews, idea generation sessions, they're driven to this platform. And this is where all the engagement magic happens, essentially. So they're able to go in here to complete tasks for us, also to get to know each other as well. We've got a forum area where they can just have sort of chats amongst themselves, create their own discussions. But through all of this engagement, and Karen, if you just hit the mouse a couple of times, you can see the level of engagement that we've had. And this is just over the last 6 months, because I mentioned that we started a pilot last March, but that was essentially for 3 months. So we did that just to see how it would go. We dipped our toe in the water with it. It went really, really well. So we decided to launch a second pilot, which we did last September, and it's just closed. And these are the stats from that second pilot. So you can see the level of, or the volume of engagement that we've had, and the amount of information that we've been able to capture from our Gen Z community. And over that period we ran 40 tasks. It was managed in-house, so we had the platform designed for us, but essentially all of the sort of day-to-day management was happening within our research team. And through that we have really got a sense of the things which are really important to them and what motivates them. And I'll go through a list of some of the kind of topics that we've covered with this group in a minute. But if I tell you a bit about how it works in principle. So as I mentioned, each month what we were looking to do was run a minimum of at least 5 tasks with our community members. And as I mentioned, there was a range of different activity types that we were putting their way. So polls, idea generation sessions, also testing campaigns, which Karen will talk to you about in a sec. And then also weekly fun engagement activities as well. So quizzes and things just so that they could get to know each other as well. And in terms of the kind of topics that we've run on the on the panel and, you know, we've explored with this group, it's things like social media habits, communication preferences. We've also done things like loads of future looking activities as well. So getting a sense from them in terms of those big trends around sort of technological advancement and AI and the impact on the accountancy profession. So how do they think it's going to change, or how does the profession need to change to keep in step with these changes? We've also looked at more generally barriers to entry to the profession. And we've also done softer topics as well around things like mental health and well-being. But that's just a snapshot of some of the things that we've explored with the group. And of course, we've done lots of sort of campaign testing activities as well. So Karen, if we move on to the next slide, I just wanted to share a few quotes from some of our participants in terms of what they've got from the activity. We've got masses from it as an organization, and it's something that's being used by various groups to inform their content strategies, but also challenge thinking as well across the organization. And sort of Karen and her group are big users of it, but you know, our social media team as well, they're starting to engage with it. And as well as that, sort of teams, so our central strategy team as well have been taking some of this away as well. But you know, in terms of what community members are saying, they absolutely loved it. It's been fantastic from not a PR perspective, but essentially for getting our brand out there and sort of getting greater engagement from younger audiences as well. So they know a bit more about what ACCA is about, and they think it's great that we are thinking about being forward thinking in terms of how we're looking to engage with them and trying to draw them into some of what we're doing in terms of the shaping of our future strategy. So all the feedback around this has been very, very positive. It's a lot of hard work to manage full time, I must say, but generally speaking, it's been great, and the payoff has been tenfold. So it's something that we want to keep running, and we're looking to the future, and we're thinking about a third phase potentially. But as I mentioned, the ambition is to turn this into something a bit more long term. I will stop there, but Karen, I will now hand back to you.
Thank you, Jo. So amongst many things, what the panel has given us is the insight to start to look at how we speak to Gen Zs. And one of the first things we turned to do was to look to flex our brand tone of voice and brand guidelines to make sure we're speaking to Gen Zs. And I looked to take inspiration from brands like Monzo, who do that so well, I think, and very quickly became the most recommended brand to Gen Zs within the UK, and also look at redefining our visual identity. What kind of visuals turn Gen Zs on and off? This panel was a great testbed to really deepen our insight on things like that. So we're currently underway of just looking at our brand and making sure it speaks to Gen Zs. When it comes to visuals, brands like Depop really kind of speak to me, and I suppose we've tried to take inspiration from their boldness and confidence, and identify the realness that is so important to Gen Zs. Committing to EDI is also, I would say, key, and that is something we do quite well at ACCA. It speaks to the very heart of our brand values, but this really doesn't matter to Gen Zs. We can't underestimate that. They're the most diverse generation, and they need to recognise this in brands that they want to connect with. The other thing that has been interesting to do is to really look and try and identify some niche communities and what really matters to Gen Zs, and start to align content. So start to align the niche communities with what matters to ACCA, and look to find that connectivity and how we can penetrate those niches and align content with motivations and aesthetics. And that really matters to them, and it's that real, I suppose, relevance and being able to see and hear themselves in the way that we speak to them has been really important, and looked at building a content strategy aligned with Gen Z motivators and levers. And what I found helpful to do is to construct that around 6 core pillars. Sorry, I couldn't remember the slides I just put together last night. So the core pillars, if I can just talk you through those quite quickly, are things like personality. So how do we really leverage the personality of our employees, of our new hires, of the people that we've got, and kind of bring out the storytelling aspect there. Of course, one thing that really brings out personality is using influencer content. So finding digital influencers in the Gen Z space and finding macro trends and creators and building content around that. Information. Gen Zs use social media for searching for information in the way that isn't just associated with search engines anymore. So we need to offer the same kind of value exchange on social as we do on a website, which is worth bearing in mind. And also creating useful and meaningful content that will inform Gen Z. So things like insights related to the industry that we work in, things like career paths into that industry. So that real information is really key for them to be armed with. To be transparency is so key to Gen Zs. So to go with more direct, what I call on the nose content that doesn't rely on the audience making psychological connections and trying to be too clever in our marketing, just trying to say it in plain English like it is, has been really successful. Using case studies to show what it's really like to work within an organisation, the day in the lives, all of that thing is really really does resonate with Gen Zs. The fourth content pillar is relatability. So leaning into culturally relevant events is really key. Moving away from polished brand assets towards more authentic and human content driven by connections is really key. And sometimes it can be hard to wrestle a brand department away from that branded content, but it's about rawness and authenticity. Ambition, showcasing the aspirational leaders within an organisation and within a company can be really key. So that's somebody that Gen Zs can actually aspire to be like. Talking about jobs that they can do now is also important. So we're not kind of talking to them too far in the future, and showing them examples of fast progression really works well. And finally, entertainment, storytelling based. To tell a story within your content and entertain would be some real core advice from me. And that doesn't mean entertaining doesn't have to be funny, doesn't have to be slapstick. It's about being entertaining and capturing their imagination. So things like serializing content works well. So you've got them coming back for more. So that's just a snapshot of some of the things we've learned within our time using the panel, which is just so useful to test campaigns before they even hit the market. So I wanted to, before I leave you, don't know if we'll have any time for questions, but I was hoping so, but I'm not sure we managed to build that in. But trendjacking in the social world has been something that's worked really well for us. It's something we've started to experiment with. And one of the interesting things working with digital influencers, where I initially did that, really talking about the attractiveness of the profession and trying to drive excitement and reinvent how Gen Z saw accountancy. And one of the interesting things that we noticed pretty quickly is that people were actually converting to be ACCA students on the back of those campaigns. So it wasn't just early on in the funnel, it was really pushing Gen Zs through the sales funnel and really resonating with them. So I wanted to share just one example of a trend on TikTok that was very popular recently, girl maths. So we used that girl maths concept to raise awareness about a career in accountancy. And it was really about driving conversions to the website to find out more. So you can see just some of the results we got here, but we got a whole load of over 2.5 million views, a lot of likes, comments, saves, shares, which are all kind of important metrics and can give an insight into how it's landed. So we worked with two very different influencers, and I'm going to play these for you, and they're very short, just to give a bit of idea on the kind of different content that appeals to Gen Z. And one of the beauties of working with social media is that you can fail fast, learn, move on, see what works, see what resonates, and learn from that. So that sound isn't working, is it? That is annoying. I don't know why, but I know Gareth is going to share this with you afterwards. So that's a shame. So SLA plans and all that. But there's two very different approaches to the girls. Obviously, girl maths is very tongue-in-cheek. He's talking about taking clothes back to the shop, and then effectively you make money when you get the refund. And for anybody that is familiar with TikTok, you'll recognise the four brothers on the right.
About girl math, she was like, if I return my massive clothes order, we're making money for Christmas. Where's the logic? You haven't saved a penny. All you've done is save wardrobe space for your clothes, which won't get worn anyway. What kind of math is that? Mate, what a joke.
Actually, I'm not too sure about that. My mate's ACCA qualified gives me the backing to kind of delve into the numbers a bit there. And I hate to say it, I think she has a point. The thing is, with the rise in interest rates, which is a staggering 6.1%, the money she's going to save using girl math is actually going to grow tenfold. So, you don't have to be a genius to be an accountant, fellas. Open your eyes a bit, yeah? Go on.
Way to kill the mood, mate.
Just letting you boys know. I mean, maybe look, if you guys signed up to the ACCA, you know, you'd be clued up in all of this. Anyway, got to shoot. My mate's actually off to the Caribbean himself. He's invited me with him. Perks the job.
Yeah, so can't get her to play, but never mind, you can go and take a look after. So the four brothers really excelled as creators in this campaign. The authentic, engaging content really did resonate with the audience. And my advice, my biggest piece of advice would be, if you're going to work with creators like this, give them the creative freedom. So find the ones that really align, understand your brand, and are excited by your brand because it comes across, and then give them the creative freedom. Obviously, you get to see the content and check it's not going to upset your brand too much before you put it out. But yeah, don't try and give them a script because it just doesn't work. So this collaboration not only benefited the four brothers' reputation on TikTok within the community, but positively influenced our brand perception. And it's really nice and reassuring when we get lots of comments from accountants that work in the profession when they see us in this space. Because when we started to do that, we didn't know how that would land with some of our more established members, but they seem to love it and be really proud of their profession and their professional body. So at that point, I'll hand back to Gareth. I'll check the comments to see what if we've got any questions in there. But again, really, really keen to work with any of our employer partners on this kind of content. So if it's something that anybody's interested in partnering with to destigmatise, you know, some of the accounting profession, do reach out to me directly, and I'd be really keen to have a chat. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you, Joe. Some amazing insight there. Love those TikTok videos at the end, actually. I mean, that just blows my mind with the possibilities of, getting some influencers, some kind of brand ambassadors, you know, cooperating with you. And there are plenty in accountancy, actually. There's a lot of very visible sort of ambassadors for accountancy, for the qualifications, for apprenticeships, for instance. So my mind is already whirring as to some potential collaborations we could try. But thank you for that. Yeah, and if anyone's got any kind of comments or questions for Karen and Joe, please do put them through the chat box. I'm sure they won't mind answering them. And yeah, we will share, if you don't mind us sharing the slides with the videos when we send around the collateral. I'm sure people will like to dig into that. No, thank you. Really great start. Really already got some brilliant points out of that first presentation. And actually, we are joined by my colleague Ben, who did actually host most of the last session, because given it was Gen Z, ironically, I had to do the school run with my Gen Zs. So, I mean, Ben, any sort of observations on anything that came up last time, or anything that Karen and Joe have just talked about?
Hello, everybody. I feel like we have started where we left off. It was a seamless segue, actually. I've got the notes that I wrote down as we were presenting last time, Gareth. I wrote down 3 headings, I think 3 things that a lot of people look for in Gen Z. First one, digital. They are a very digitally natural group of individuals. I think we talked last time about the various platforms you can engage with. So we've just seen the ACCA using TikTok, Snapchat, lots of other platforms to explore, and actually not presuming the platforms that the Gen Zers are on, but actually engaging them to recommend which platforms are going to go down and resonate best with them as a group. We saw examples of videos. We've seen another great one there from the ACCA. The last session we looked at some, a real hit on the senses. They're fast paced. There is talking. Since the last session, I think we've actually gone back and put subtitles on a lot of our videos. That was something that came out last time, that as well as just listening to people, they quite like to be able to read if they're on a train, for example. They like to be able to read the content, music. So digital was the first one. Second one was entrepreneurial. They are a very entrepreneurial generation. They will have grown up selling things on Vinted. My daughters are forever packaging up used clothes or sports equipment and selling it and sending it off online. Something that was very much talked about last time was not hiding away from the money. Don't be scared to talk about the money, the salary, the progression. They are skeptical. If that is silent, they will presume there is something to hide. So not being scared to talk about money, which we should all be able to do in our world of accountancy. That was number 2, entrepreneurial. And the last one, Gareth, was connected. These guys are very connected, but we can facilitate and help those connections. So if you've got a group that are coming through for an interview selection day, are they connecting with each other? Are we facilitating that? Is there a WhatsApp group already forming for the people that are joining your organization in September? But also connecting them with other people, mentors, examples of apprentices from the last 2-3 years that they can start connecting with already. And even those connections from the top. Gareth, something I know you always do when we get new members of our team join is to connect with them as one of our senior directors and actually looking to form those connections early on. And the last bit with that really is about the content sharing. Something else that was just mentioned there by Karen at the ACCA, the best people to share your content if you want it seen by Gen Z are Gen Z themselves. So encouraging your existing members of the team to share your content, to engage with your social media, but to share that with their networks, with their groups, because that is massively going to get the message in front of the right people. So thank you, ACCA. Off to a brilliant start. Looking forward to the rest of the session, but I'm going to have to watch on catch up because I'm actually going off into a class to teach them level 4, predominantly all Gen Z. So I'm on the coalface today, actually talking and engaging with the audience.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ben. That point about entrepreneurial, actually, some friends of mine, their teenage son sells trainers. He buys and sells trainers online. He's just bought, and I'm not joking, he's just bought a McLaren, and he is in the process of moving to Dubai. I mean, he is making a ridiculous amount of money buying and selling trainers. But anyway, so yeah, I think we've got some future entrepreneurial leaders amongst our Gen Z. Anyway, I'm now going to come to David, and actually I bumped into David last night at a networking event, which was discussing the kind of links between education and the workplace. So David, do you want to introduce yourself and give us your insight?
Sure thing. So hello, everybody. My name's David Brockway, and I'm the product manager at Form the Future, which you won't be able to see our little logos behind me. So for those of you unfamiliar, Form the Future are a careers education and careers advice organisation based in Cambridge. So we provide a range of careers education activities to young people in this sort of greater Cambridge area. And as a result of this, we get a lot of opportunities to engage with young people and sort of Gen Z. And I don't know when Gen Z ends and Generation Alpha begins, but I assume we're coming into contact with some of them at our younger age groups. Doing the type of work we do, we have a lot of conversations, a lot of interactions with young people who are starting to consider work, but also going through all those different stages. So we do, most of our work starts at year 7, so that's 11-year-olds, but some is with primary school students as well, who are already starting to think about their work and their future opportunities. And then that goes through to 18-year-olds and even some young adults who are out of education. So we get the opportunity to see and hear the opinions of young people who are going through that whole sort of formative stage of who they want to be, what they want to do, and how they're going to find work. A little bit about myself. I've been doing youth work of various sorts for over a decade now. I've been in Form of the Future for 3 years. But before that, I've been running PSHE workshops in schools. I've never been a teacher, so I haven't built those really sort of long-term relationships with students and got to know them. But I have had the opportunity to go into schools all over the country and sort of hear different opinions and attitudes. So it's given me quite a good opportunity to get some idea of sort of the people that we're talking about. But that is a crucial point. We are talking about them and we are not them. And this is one of the things that I really like to sort of say first and foremost is that there is a tendency to create a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy when it comes to Generation Z. I'm 35. I had no idea I was a millennial when I was at school. It was not part of my identity. No one mentioned it. It wasn't in the media. You had nothing telling you this is who you are. This is what your generation does. This is what you like. These are your stereotypes. So I think before we have any conversation about, how interact with Gen Z, we must always take account of that point. You are coming across some young people who during, the formative years of their life do receive a message that is telling them they are a certain type of person. And that's a really hard thing to get your head around when it didn't happen to you. So I think it's one of the first things I always want to say is hold that thought in mind when you are thinking about your Gen Zers and how that could impact them. And on that, they are just young people. There isn't a sort of a fix-all for the whole generation. There are definitely a lot of overlaps. As one of the last speakers said, the interest in EDI and environmental issues does tend to be prevalent across a majority of the generation. Not all of them, but a majority. But that doesn't mean they're all the same and they've all got different attitudes. I've met young people who are creating LinkedIn careers as a Gen Z specialist. They've figured us out and they are doing a great job at 19 years old of saying this is how to speak to people my age. I've met others who I've mentored who honestly would have had attitudes and values that fitted into the 70s and 80s, who were just I want to be a solid member of my community, get a job and afford a house, nothing else. So do remember that it is just going to be patronizing if you talk to this whole generation as though they've all got the same ideas, because there is just as much variety, just as much variance and just as much difference, whether that's in confidence and attitude or values as there are from other generations. That said,
Dave, sorry to chip in actually, David. I'm just thinking that's a really useful and interesting point, and I'm just wondering whether it's a bit like politics, the stuff you see is the most extreme version of the right and the left, and the sort of middle ground gets a bit ignored, even though it's probably the majority. I'm wondering whether there's something around that actually, by definition, the people we see visually online on social media will be the ones that have the most kind of extreme positions and the most extreme views.
Possibly. I mean, I would definitely consider it a political issue because you will see politicians trying to garner votes through, do we start a culture war about gender, which is going to be more motive to Gen Z, or do we talk about triple plating a pension, which is going to be more tempting to boomers? So yeah, the sort of generational divides can definitely be politicized. I wouldn't dare to say anything about extreme because I think when you're talking about Gen Z voices, we see that they're just talking about being themselves. But I think it's more who's more out there. And as you say, that's always the thing, isn't it? If you're an 18-year-old who's managed to create a social media profile that's sort of reached a bigger public domain, you're an outlier. There's huge success and a lot of dedication and interest in social media. It doesn't mean that you are the same as everyone else. And that's the other thing that I think we all need to remember here. although this is sort of a group generation of people who have used a lot more social media and a lot more connected to it, they're still kids in school. Like most of them grew up like with what, like 140 kids in their year group, of which they know about 80 and of which they know about 20 really closely. So like for a lot of them, they connect with others on social media and do have these conversations, which is a big difference from our generation. So they can be exposed to attitudes of their age from beyond just their immediate circle. But a lot of those who they know really well, that's still a small sample size. It's not too much different from the people that you would have gained your idea of what it was like growing up when you were young. Yeah, the other thing I'd like to say on this, because I mentioned digital, and I'm going to sort of go into sort of some of the key points I've got here, is around which digital. So I think your colleague Gareth had just mentioned that sort of there's a high digital literacy, and we use this sort of language of digital natives as one of the ones that was very popular a few years ago. And yes, this sort of generation do tend to be a lot more aware of social media, and they would have had a lot more of an app-based life. So, you know, most people coming through 18, 19 now would have never used any sort of physical banking. It could have all been done via a smartphone, via an app. So you're going to find a generation of people here who have got a lot of confidence in doing things based on an app. That will be the norm. They'll be able to provide you with some useful feedback on that, give you information. However, that does not translate to all sort of aspects of IT. And one of the things we often hear from the employers who want to work with us and come in and talk to young people is the ability to use Excel, an understanding of how to sort of manage your inbox and so forth, is normally pretty lacking. And so that's something that, you know, hasn't changed in 20 odd years. And I think it's important for us now that, you know, we've come of age through a computer age, and it's now just part and parcel of our life, to understand that something like Excel, you know, being good or bad at it is kind of like being good or bad at maths. It's a skill that is really helpful to have, but not everyone does. And just because you're part of a generation where other forms of tech are more common, that doesn't mean that you adopted those sort of other more work-focused ones. So understanding that and providing that sort of training and support is vital. Within that sort of tech standards issue, I would also go on to video conferencing software. And that's something which we've come across quite a lot from employers we work with, is what's the etiquette? How do you use Teams, Zoom, etc.? Things like, do you have your camera on during a sort of a team meeting or one-on-one? It's a small issue, but I'm sure any of you who have come across it can realize that it can sort of create some friction, whether it's just this is the norm of our company, or that, you know, it's sort of you feel like more respected and engaged if someone else is on camera. So understanding that that's something that also needs to be taught is really important. And again, not making that assumption that just because this is a generation where they use other forms of media more often, that this is one they're used to. And in fact, what we do normally find is that, and I don't think this is just because it's Gen Z, I think it's because it's young people, and we probably all would have been like this at their age. Not wanting to turn the camera on is like one of those big issues to do with confidence. It's something that a lot of people shy away from. And so sort of don't see it as sort of, oh, this is this different generation who are sort of somehow genetically anti-camera. It's just a bit of a getting used to it thing, a bit of a confidence issue. Just as in our first day at the workplace, when we were in our first jobs, we might have been a bit shy, not knowing what to do. It's the same equivalent, but it's gone digital. So just treat it in the same way of, you know, having patience and realizing that will come with time. I mentioned communication there, and that's one of the other points I want to talk about. So one of the issues we've come across quite a few times is stuff like if someone is a new starter, new in the job, they're asked to do a task, they complete it, but they don't tell anyone. So that's sort of something which can be really frustrating for an employer or manager wanting to sort of, you know, be getting someone into the swing of things, getting them part of the team. Again, probably not that different from different generations. It's a pattern that you've got to learn. But do be aware that, you know, that is still an issue. And what is critical to this generation, that can be exacerbated if you're doing some remote working. So if you don't have the ability to just, walk past someone in their office and sort of stop by their desk and say, have you completed that task yet? And then explain why you might have needed them to tell you. You have to actually actively go and do that to a larger extent. So we're going to be coming across a lot of the issues that aren't that different, but the context has changed. What is a sort of a fairly across the board issue? So I said we're not going to treat Gen Z as all the same, but there are definitely some macro issues where there will be overlap. Is confidence in communication. So there's a bit of an irony here that a lot of time spent communicating online can create a lot of confidence in an online persona, maybe one that records videos in their own time and shares them. And so there's a very confident self out there, or someone who does a lot of typing in text chat, whether that's through social media platforms whilst gaming, etc. But that doesn't necessarily come through to in-person communication. And there has definitely been an impact on that from the pandemic. There have been so many studies, as well as all the sorts of anecdotal information that we've seen out there, that the pandemic's had an impact on young people. Whether this be because they had to sort of massively change their life all of a sudden overnight when they were teenagers, or because it has created some general anxiety, and those are all factors. One of the ones that we're really aware of as a careers education organisation is that quite a lot of young people missed their opportunity to take part in work experience. And work experience has a massive impact on someone's ability to find a future career. It's one of the biggest factors in changing confidence and interest in work. And it's one of the biggest factors in helping them to understand what they do and don't like. So missing out on that opportunity means that some of those Gen Z people coming through to you would not have had some of the same experiences as people you would have employed in previous years. So they will need some additional support. But make sure you see that as a challenge to overcome, not an excuse to avoid trying. We don't want to write them off as sort of these people who have got a lack of confidence, or the fact that they are feeling that they're lacking confidence leads them to do things like not want to put their video on or not want to participate in open conversation. It's your role to help them do that. There is no reason a young person coming into work today cannot be as confident as anyone from a previous generation. The world just does not work that way. If we've got these young people coming in saying that they haven't had some experiences, or they're obviously feeling less confident, listen to them, care about them, but help them to get there. The worst thing we can do is label this generation as having some issues of confidence and then fail them. It's our responsibility to bring them up just as we would any other employee. Another issue that I'd like to talk about is around professional standards. So these are classic things like the way in which you write emails or interact with colleagues. I think this is yet another example of where we've got similar issues, but a change in context, in that each generation will have its own slang. And I'm actually thinking of running a workshop later this year in which I'll get ChatGPT to write me an email as a typical boomer versus as a typical Gen Z, and see where our differences in language appear. Because this isn't about trying to, crush someone's individuality or make them, sort of conform to your standards. It's about finding a way of communicating that works for everybody. So it's being able to use language that will make anyone you're talking to feel comfortable and understood. I think that's one of the important things that we do mention, because the sort of one of those stereotypes that has filtered down to a lot of younger Gen Z people is that workplaces might stop you being your authentic self, and that being told you have to write in a certain way could be one of those. So explaining the reasons why is really helpful. One of our previous speaker, I think ACCA, mentioned brand personality, which is a really important issue. And something I'd like to mention there is that due to social media and an internet world, this generation would have had a sort of a pretty lifelong exposure to brands using multiple forms of media to sort of very much actively get their attention. And this is something that would have happened in a way that has not happened to those of us in previous generations who had a less internet saturated life. So they're very used to a type of brand and a voice targeted at them. your brand may not be the same once they're in. So whereas the ACCA presentation was talking a bit about how to appeal to Gen Z, I'm looking at this more from a perspective of, well, how do you get them to talk like you? Who's your audience? How do they like, what are the differences between the brands they're used to seeing and the voice that you want to display? So in one respect, this is just introducing a new colleague to the concept of a brand identity and a brand voice. But just to do it in a way that means that you're making them aware of why this matters and why it's significant. Last point I'll go on to before I go through a few final tips.
David, I'm going to have to, can you be quick to just finish off, please?
Sure thing. No, but I've got another call as well. So yeah, last
David.
one is around hierarchy. So we've had a lot of input from people saying that, when I was in my first job, X decades ago, being micromanaged to an element and having that someone come in and give me assignments really helped me find my feet. But what we have here is a generation where schooling, education, and after school clubs, all those more institutional experiences have been quite different. There's been a big change since then. So something that might have worked for you when you were entering your first job will not work for these young people in the same way. So really sort of getting that approach in your head is really important. It doesn't mean that you throw your processes out the window, but what it does mean, and this is how I'll wrap all this up, is that you just got to talk to your new entrants, talk to these young people, find out, from them what matters, what's important. Did they miss work experience? Are there areas they're less confident in? Are there specific platforms they want to learn more about because they know that a lot of other young people are using them? Having that conversation, asking them is the single best thing that you can do.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. I think that the point you were making around not making assumptions, particularly around things like technology, I hear a lot from employers that Excel skills, as you mentioned, are not where employers might expect them to be. And so this idea of being digital native and using social media and using apps doesn't mean they're going to be automatically good at specific tools and functions. But thank you very much for your time, David. Really appreciate that. Okay. Going to hand straight over to Tom. Tom, do you want to introduce yourself and take us through your thoughts?
Of course, yeah. Can I share my screen or?
Yes, I think you should be a co-host.
Okay.
So you should be able to share.
There we go. Yeah, cool. Cool. Is that sharing?
Yeah, got that, Tom.
Okay, cool. Cheers. Thanks very much for having me today, guys. I'm not going to kind of go through this too much, but basically my background is I was a shareholder at QA, one of the leading tech and digital apprenticeship providers in the UK. Helped scale them across the north of England over a 6-year period. And then I moved into being a shareholder of a tech business, which was a recruitment marketplace. So I spent kind of all my career in sales leadership roles, working with young people, trying to obviously engage them into work. Kind of came across an issue, I guess, within the sector that I felt that there was certainly a gap in the market for a new approach to careers. And about 2 years ago, set off on a journey of setting up a company called Your Future. So we are now live. We raised investment with the former CEO of AO.com about 12 months ago, and we've now slowly been scaling the business. And what we've created is the first job platform for young people in the UK. So a job platform that is an app and web-based platform, and it's only for jobs for young people. So focusing on entry-level careers, apprenticeships, those sorts of roles. We currently have the biggest TikTok page in careers in the UK at the moment. So we recently have just been invited onto TikTok next month to actually spend some time with them around the success we've had on TikTok. So kind of in the last 30 days, we had over 12 million organic views, 218,000 organic likes and 10,000 comments on our channels. And we're now translating that into building our own community through our platform and through our app. And we, in 9 weeks, signed up just short of 6,000 people onto the platform who are all looking for careers and looking for work. And we're continuing to scale that. The idea behind the business is to really just create a place where young people find jobs all in one place. Really focusing on kind of the element of being able to match with a career like you would match with things based on your personality, being able to watch and learn about careers rather than read about it, and then also being able to find jobs. So I just wanted to start with kind of like what the Blockbuster, taxis, the high street and HMV all have in common. I don't know, I can't see the chat, but if anybody wants to kind of say what do we think they all have in common, those things. I'll try and pop my chat up so I can see, but I think I'm sharing. I don't know if you could see them.
All a bit out of date and replaced by something else.
Exactly. So all of them didn't kind of move with the times as people moved, and the age groups changed from millennials to Gen Z, and buying patterns changed. And what we've seen now is within sort of the Gen Z community, the way they consume music is all done through Spotify or Apple Music, and it's replaced CDs, it's replaced that world. The way they engage with taxis is now all Uber, and it's not kind of the traditional way. The way they watch TV and film is all through Netflix, replacing things like Blockbuster. And the way they shop and go out and really spend their money in terms of with shopping is done on places like Boohoo, which are all app-based. And I think, the common theme across all these is that they're all app-based, they're all easy to use, they're all colourful, and they're all engaging through a smartphone. And I think what we are learning around kind of careers is that there isn't a place at the moment for this. And that's a kind of concern, because how are you going to engage and give a good experience to a certain age group if it's not relative to them? What we kind of learn about Gen Z is that the TikTok obsessed, they're probably confused by a lot of stuff. I think spending every day with a team of social creators in our team who are 19, and some of the bands I listen to and things like that, they have no idea who they are. You really kind of get to grips with kind of like the difference between age, and I am only 34. So what we kind of started to learn is that Gen Z really communicate with video and images rather than my generation who communicate with text. They like to create things and really kind of create their own things. They focus on the future. And I think it was mentioned earlier, kind of one of the key things I really learned about Gen Z was that they search everything through social media. Everything they do in terms of like whether it be finding a job, whatever it might be, hints, tips, advice, it's all done through socials, while my generation was all through search engines. So we kind of knew that was a place to kind of focus as a business in terms of how we would grow our audience quickly. And I think when you look at kind of the demographic today at the moment in the career space, are we doing the right things as businesses, as apprenticeship providers? Are we engaging them in the right way? So our careers fair is really what Gen Z want to engage with, or is it something that we've done for 30 years, so therefore we're continuing to do it, a bit like the Blockbusters of the world? Are CVs really relevant to that age group? Are job boards and job specs, which are all plain text, black and white, long paragraphs, are they all really relevant to that? And are you going to engage with that as a Gen Z who's digitally native and constantly on apps all the time? And what we started to learn was that is the issue. So a couple of things I wanted to go through is kind of like candidate engagement. So how do you engage with people? Well, 98% of Gen Z are on a smartphone. Yeah, 91% of them get the first mobile device before the 16, and then they spend nearly 6 hours a day on the phone. So when you're creating content, I think it was mentioned earlier on by the ACCA, you've got to kind of create your content very, very short, maximum of 30 to 60 seconds. You need to engage reactions immediately. You need to be super authentic. We started a TikTok channel with no followers, no likes, nothing about us. And now we outperform major brands on TikTok who have been going for 30, 40 years because we're authentic, because we do short content. And that's really been proven that the theory really works. We have built kind of like a presence of doing street interviews. So we go out and interview people in the street all about the different types of careers that they have. And from that, what we are doing is educating people, but in a non-formal way. So young people like watching our content, they like learning about careers, but they don't feel like they're learning at the same time. So I think being able to educate people in non-formal ways is really important. You've got to be really consistent with your content when you produce on social media, and especially TikTok, really consistent with the way that you need to find a topic and then stick to it and not try and talk about multiple different things. And one thing we've learned is you really need to target one channel first. I think so many companies and businesses make the mistake of trying to do Instagram, do YouTube, do TikTok, do all the different channels, and you've really just got to focus on one, get it right, get the methods that you're doing, and spend a lot of time on that one channel, and then move on to something else.
Tom, actually, just on that point,
Yeah.
where would you suggest somebody starts if they're going to focus on one channel?
I've got kind of one of my slides is just around kind of the channels you can utilize. For us, obviously, we chose TikTok because it is the most popular within the Gen Z age group for searching for careers. So we did research, and if you speak to Gen Z, where they search for jobs, where they search for career advice, where they search things is TikTok, because obviously it's short format content. They can learn very quickly about something and consume that information really quickly without having to go online and read a 10-page website about what they want to learn. They can just watch it in a 30-second video. So what you're looking for when you're kind of online or on TikTok is, you know, you can get key metrics. So some of our metrics here in the last 60 days, you can see kind of like we've had 20 million views on our videos, but what the views actually mean, what it means is it's visibility. It's getting your brand out there. It's getting you aware of people aware of what you do, who you are. Because every time you get that view, it means that somebody's seen you and seen you as a brand. So we, for example, you know, now have people coming up to us in the street and they know who we are. And that's just come from the visibility of kind of who we are as a brand and people seeing us. Obviously, likes is brand appreciation. So people are actually appreciating the content that you're putting out there, and they like what they're seeing. And so, you know, when you're looking at those metrics, you need to be checking how, you know, are people actually liking it? Sharing's a massive things within this community. And, you know, if you can get shares, it means that it's basically free advertising for you. Gen Z are very community based, and therefore, if they're sharing it to their friends, they're going to buy in. A lot of kind of we are focusing a lot at the moment on candidates who've been through our process now and had a good experience of getting them to talk about it, because I know somebody mentioned influencers earlier. I think influencers are great, but Gen Z are quite aware of kind of that they've been paid to do it. You know, they're not kind of stupid. And I think more getting people who've actually been through your process and can talk about it authentically actually lands more with Gen Z, because it's real and it actually means something. Profile views obviously is great because you're getting brand awareness. So one thing we've really focused on is kind of getting as many people to our profile, because you can put some great content out there and then maybe have some more informative things about your brand, about your careers, about what you do on your profile. So what you do is you're driving people from TikTok onto your profile and then giving them further information about what you do as a business, and therefore you're going to engage them that way. And obviously comments are great. One of the things we found with comments, you know, we've had 17,000 comments on our post in the last 60 days. But when we actually read through the comments, we're getting so many people now who've been through processes. Maybe they've applied for an apprenticeship and actually gone on, done the job and been successful in it, and then are replying back to people in our comments. And we're getting this massive community of people talking to each other and helping each other. And I think if you can start to drive that, it's really important for your brand, but also really important for the people who are viewing your content, because they know that if they go and comment on your future post, it means that we're probably going to be able to get somebody who's been a lawyer before and has been a lawyer for 2, 3, 4 years, be able to actually write back to them and answer the questions that they've got. So from that, we've been able to build this community of people who are all watching our videos and then are all supporting each other. So where you can kind of engage Gen Z is there's 4 main channels that are the common ones that everyone knows, but I think there's different ways of doing it. So with TikTok, it's probably the easiest to grow organically very fast if you get it right. It's also a very difficult channel because there's a lot of noise on it. But if I was looking as a business to start somewhere, I would start organically on TikTok. You can also do paid on TikTok. So very, very easy to use. You can use Spark ads, or you can use just boosting your posts. If you were looking at starting on an Instagram, like Instagram Reels, I would take the paid approach first. Organic is very hard to grow on Instagram, extremely difficult, but you can, through paid channels, actually grow your Instagram following quite quickly. We've not put one post on Instagram, but we've already got 400, 500 followers just from some of the paid stuff that we've done. You know, we've never posted on it. We've never even tried on it. So I think like with Instagram, you can drive engagement. You can drive things through a bit more of a paid approach. Snapchat, sorry, should say paid, because with Snapchat, there is no organic, it is all paid. So if you're going to use Snapchat, it needs to be paid. You need to be using paid ads because you're not going to grow a presence through Snapchat organically. And then with YouTube, once again, it's a very difficult channel to use. So therefore, actually looking at YouTube, it's got to be paid and then growing organically off the back of that. There is, though, growing channels, which I don't know if people are aware of, things like Discord, Twitch, are massive channels, especially for digitally native people who like to game, who like to Twitch stream, which is very popular in the Gen Z age group. So utilizing them channels with paid is really useful, because you're actually going to hit people that are a bit more niche. So we found that with our best kind of candidates who are coming, maybe who are looking at more digital careers, they're all coming from those sorts of areas, because that's what they do day to day. They game, they spend time on those things. And then also a really good channel is Reddit. You know, I don't know how many people use Reddit. You wouldn't think potentially Gen Z, but it is massively important for Gen Z. And it's a really good way to actually build kind of a community, and quite organically. There's so many people are asking questions on Reddit. So if you have a brand and you have somebody who works in the community space for you, can just go and reply back to comments on Reddit and give advice and give support from a company account. It's a really easy way to build a community and actually add value to people. So yeah, there's a few niche ones there that we utilize that are actually we're finding really useful.
I know, Tom, sorry, that piece around gaming, I was chatting to an employer recently who said that their latest 7 recruits all said their chief form of socializing was gaming. So actually, that could well be a good route. Can I give you a couple of minutes just to summarize your finish?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think obviously candidate experience, I think if you forget about engagement, it's no point engaging people without having the right experience when they actually land where you want them to land. And one of the biggest challenges that employers have is that they've still got the same experience for somebody who's a millennial or a boomer than they do for Gen Z. So actually engaging them in the right way is the key thing around candidate experience. Is it black and white? Does it stand out? What value are you giving them? So through our platform, every candidate takes a career personality assessment, and it gives them the match to each career that they have. And then they can actually go and see the working traits that they have. So are you actually giving them any value? Is it familiar or is it repetitive? When you're thinking about candidate experience, look at the way that everything they experience today is, and then look at how your experience is with it as an employer. Does it match up or does it not? If it doesn't, you've got an issue there, because that's why you may not be able to engage people, because they're so used to a certain experience that when they come to what they do with your business, it's totally different. I see this, you know, this is the issue, you know, CVs, job application forms, long format text. It's not how you engage young people anymore. And if you don't change, you won't engage them. And the businesses that do change will engage them. So obviously that's what we've been working on, is kind of building that one place, one app where you can create a profile instead of a CV. You know, why do young people need to create a CV? If you're so used to creating social profiles, wouldn't it be so much easier for a young person to create a social profile about themselves, and then you could view them through that? You're collecting the same information, but you're delivering it in a different way. You know, how are your jobs displayed? Are they in video format? Are they easy to consume? Do they have likes? Do they have favorites? Can the candidates see the salary? Can they see all the key information about it? How are you giving the careers content that you're giving to them? Is it in a Netflix style where it's all short 30-second, 40-second videos? Or is the careers content that you're giving them 10-page paragraph information? Because if it is, they won't read it, while they will watch a 30-second video. So I think for me, just focusing, my main message would be in terms of what we're learning is that it's not just about engaging people, which is really important. It's also about the experience and the journey that they go on once they've engaged with your brand, which is why now obviously we're working not only on our own brand, but we're also working with some of the leading providers in the UK now to actually build out their brands in terms of how they engage with Gen Z, and creating landing pages and mobile apps for them so that they can actually engage with Gen Z in a proper way. So yeah, sorry, I feel it's a bit rushed because I don't do you short for time, but any questions I would be happy to kind of take.
Brilliant, thank you, Tom. Yeah, some brilliant stuff there, actually. That idea of a social profile rather than the CV, I think that's really interesting. And the Netflix style, I wonder whether we should say, if you liked this job advert, you might like this job advert, and have ratings.
Well, yeah, we have all that, you know, that I think that's what we, you know, that's what we've built in terms of it as a platform, is you know, you can do that. You know, you watch videos in the app, but you also apply for jobs in the app. You also work out what career is right for you, and it's all done in one place. And I think that's when you look at every aspect of a Gen Z life, that everything they do is based within that, but it's usually all contained into one place. So why shouldn't careers all be contained into one place?
Oh, brilliant. No, some really useful insight there. Thank you so much for your time. So we heard earlier from one accounting awarding body, the ACCA, who do a lot with Gen Z. Another organisation that spends a lot of time engaging with young adults is the AAT. And actually, we've got Rachel from the AAT. So Rachel, can I hand over to you?
Hi everyone, so I'm Rachel Harrison. I'm a product manager at AAT and I look after our charitable portfolio. So in that space, I support on the work we're doing to develop our early talent pipeline. So this is a bit of a grab bag of thoughts for me from speaking to other AAT colleagues, from some research, and I think most importantly from an apprenticeship survey that was completed in autumn last year. So I'm going to focus a little bit on that apprenticeship market for a while there. So working with your apprentices and recruiting them as well. So the survey, I should say, was completed up to 24 years old, so very squarely in that Gen Z market. And I think I'll start with one of the biggest influences we found on our apprenticeship take-up was actually parents. So this might not be a really obvious route to recruit from, but potentially something for people to keep in mind if you're looking to recruit apprentices in particular. So if you're developing content for stands at careers fairs or any other activity in that space, you might want to think about that audience and how to reach them as well, as they might put your, job ad in front of their children. So thinking about that, and then consider who to work with as well. There are some really interesting charities working in that space, particularly Talking Futures, which specifically try to reach parents. So I thought that one was quite interesting, and it was quite a large margin as well, the parental influence, which I think, we sort of forget about that when you're thinking about young people, but they are a big influence on them. And then I thought, and I'm going to talk very quickly today, so apologies to get through my thoughts. But one of the main pain points we had as well from our apprentices was interviews. And I imagine this isn't true just for apprentices. Two strands to this, I think, and I'm going to touch on some things David spoke about as well. If you're a young person who's never been in an office before, then that can be really intimidating. And we know this can be exacerbated by this generation having less options for work experience, particularly with COVID. They didn't get into offices at all. And also less prior actual employed experience as well. A lot of them are less likely to have worked doing admin as a teenager and things like that. So just keeping that in mind when you're doing interviews, that is potentially the first time they've ever been in an office, and that can be really intimidating. And I'm not saying, you need to make them super comfortable, but just keeping in mind when interviewing and thinking about how you set things up. But I also think that's true for online interviews, on Teams especially. As we discussed already, we have this expectation that this generation is really technologically literate. But as David also mentioned, Teams or even Google and Zoom are a completely different beast. I think, particularly in a professional setting, we've all sat on a meeting where one of our colleagues can't find the share button. So imagine you've never used Teams in that way before, and you're in an interview and you're being asked to present to a panel. I think that can be really terrifying for that generation. So think about how you use technology in interviews and the guidance you provide. Writing this up, I was actually like, is there a quick win here? Can you provide a quick how to use Teams guide to your interviewees, covering what you expect them to be able to do in an interview? Just here is this button, here's what you'll be expected to do. And also I thought that was really key actually for ensuring equity. If you've got candidates whose parents or network work in an office already, they're potentially going to have an advantage here as their parents can talk them through how to use the technology. So there's something there about ensuring they've got the same level playing field, they've got that guidance before you expect them to be able to do something with technology they may never have done before. So yeah, I think that was my key ones there. I also want to talk a little bit, I know we're going to have a third session on retention and keeping them happy, but I do have a nice point from the survey around apprenticeships. And I think one there is really understanding the apprenticeship process. So recognizing the study versus work time, also understanding what that means for employee. They might be seeing friends at university, having lots of free time, lots of fun. Obviously, that's a hopefully informed choice that your apprentices have made, but just being really cognizant of that it's a different experience for them. And thinking about that study time, be aware of what that looks like and recognize that it's an additional element that a lot of your other employees won't be juggling. So it's really important to agree on the times with them, so it's ring fenced. You might ask them to put an out of office on during study time, for example. Just giving them that headspace will help them complete their course, which is obviously great for them, but also good for you as an employer and shows you're a supportive employer as well. And I wanted to touch on there in terms of the office and that environment. One of the things we found with Gen Z is that they're often quite outwardly confident, you know, because they've used to appear on social media. We expect that from them. But just because they're outwardly confident doesn't mean that at the same time they're not just like all of us in first jobs, first time in an office, learning the ropes, understanding the environment. So I think I've mentioned this at the end, but you know, not making assumptions, I think is really key for this generation. And again, I know David touched on that, so very similar thoughts here. Another thing around making assumptions actually in the office environment is around hybrid working, I think as well. Kind of there is the stereotype of this generation being very protective of that work-life balance, which is not a bad thing necessarily, but we also know that research has demonstrated that about 3/4 of young people said they would consider their job an important part of their identity. And so if there's a need to go into the office, whether for work or just to spend time with their team, then the majority are actually happy to go in. So I think just keep that in mind. Again, it's around that and not making assumptions and treating a generation as a monolith. Think about, talk to them, talk to your, you know, what they want to do. And yeah, and similarly, career progression, in terms of retention, we know that accountancy can offer a really stair-stepped career path with clear progression pathways. So I think that's something we really need to convey to both candidates and people already in the role. And that's true for apprentices and otherwise, I think. And I think Ben mentioned this at the beginning as well. Don't be afraid of the money. You know, talk about the salary. What's it going to look like? What level you are? What you can expect to earn in the area you're in. So I think that's really key. I think potentially we've been a bit nervous around that in the past, and I think that's something we need to, you know, overcome for this generation. And then I think again, been touched on previously. One of the things I want to talk about was just the development of those like soft skills. Kind of know that a lot of new students are missing a number of these, which is having a detriment impact on their progression and in completing their qualifications as well. And there's been a growing concern over recent years, and I think that's true for both school leavers and graduates. So we know there's issues with professionalism, communication, and resilience. Again, I suppose it's just highlighting that, but it's worth thinking about what you actually can do to train up these skills. Is it mentoring? Is it shadowing? Is it discrete skills-based tasks? And again, we're saying here, be patient. This is maybe their first job. Think about how you can train these skills naturally without making them feel like, you know, they're lesser or patronizing. And also in terms of how to train them, again, we talked about this a little bit, gamification, on-demand content, simulation tasks. I think things are really active, and obviously that's something at AAT we're very keen on, is that real world learning. And I think this really works for this generation in particular. I did hear someone mention the other day something about TikTok training videos, which I thought was a fantastic way to reach this generation, using the platforms we know they're really familiar with, that they can talk to, that they're, you know, able to use daily, and using that to do the training. So that might not be something everyone is comfortable with. That is probably a little bit out there for most people. But I think the learning from that can be about how you break down your training activities and considering things like nano learning. So obviously, I think the learning from TikTok training videos isn't necessarily, oh, hey, they need to be on a social media platform. It's this idea of they learn really well in short content, quick, on-demand things they can access themselves, self-studying. And I think that's really key there. I've gone through that very quickly, and I've missed a couple of things I had because other people have covered them, but hopefully there's a few insights there that's useful. But I did want to end just on something that David discussed earlier, those Gen Z isn't a monolith. We're all really used to seeing those headlines about, you know, millennials ending the diamond trade. We all know that's not true. Same thing is true for Gen Z. I think, you know, don't make assumptions, speak to them, use the amazing resources like Gareth's put on today to get close to that audience, but also, yeah, get out there and have a chat to the audience and see what they actually want. And that's me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rachel. Actually, you know, the point you were making around, you know, giving guidance, you know, around maybe use of technology, if that's going to be part of an interview process, I think that's really important. I personally think the more guidance you give, the better, even to the point of telling them the questions they're going to be asked in an interview. I mean, why not tell them in advance so they can actually formulate a coherent answer rather than being panicked on the spot? So Yeah, I think, dress code, what should they wear to their interview? My belief is you can't make any assumptions about what they may have been exposed to or may have been told or may not have been told. Like you say, they may not have been in an office environment before. And even in the office environment, I go to clients where the managing partner is in jeans and a hoodie, and that may
And I
not
think
be.
that's a really good point, Gareth, around the dressing as well. And I mentioned equity earlier. Again, if you've got a parent who's in an office or has that kind of professional environment, your Gen Z candidate is going to know what to wear because they're going to be told. If they don't have that, they don't have that learning. And another, I should say, one of the other outcomes from the survey actually was their school, schools obviously press for time with career guidance. They're not getting mock interviews in the way perhaps some of our generation did. So really, it could also be their first experience of an interview ever, and I think that's just really key to keep in mind and be patient.
Absolutely. And patient understanding, try and put yourself in their shoes. I've got a daughter of 17, so I know what she's been through over the last 3 or 4 years, and it's had its challenges. So thank you, Rachel. Really appreciate your time. And well, to finish us off, we've had the ACCA and the AAT, a couple of the accountancy awarding bodies. I'm now going to come to Dave from the ICAW, the Institute of Chartered Accountants, which I'm actually a member of. But Dave, I know you've actually got some interesting ideas going beyond Gen Z, actually to the next generation we can expect in the workplace.
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. Hi, everyone. Dave Penn. I'm Head of Access and Volunteer Programs at ICAW. I've been working in sort of the early career space, student attraction, for 11 years now. So I think I saw the back end of millennials. Gen Z was being talked about like Gen Alpha is starting to be talked about now when I started in the industry. So I work on a program called Rise. As part of it, we engage with 14 to 15-year-olds, and actually next year we're going to lower that to 11 to 13-year-olds. So they are firmly starting to become Gen Alpha. We work with a lot of schools in less affluent areas, particularly rural and coastal communities. I know a number of employers on here and FI themselves are already involved with Rise, but if you are looking for ways to widen your talent pool and engage with that emerging generation, then let us know and reach out to me. I'm sure my contact details will be shared. But I'm here to talk today about Gen Alpha. So most commonly accepted definition of this generation is those born from about 2010 onwards. Some people say it's around about the first iPhone being released, which is sort of 2007 to 2009, depending on which market you're in. But certainly that has an influence on them. So they're currently about 13, 14, so very much the age group we're starting to engage with through Rise. Some of their influences. So parents of Gen Alpha are generally millennials, and this has an influence on them. So if you think back to all the stuff you knew about millennials or know about millennials, who are sort of the that 30 to 40 sort of generation at the moment, a bit more, they were very brand loyal. Brands was sort of an obsession for them in millennials. Some people called them entitled, perhaps narcissistic, quite individualistic. Is probably true. They grew up during the sort of boom years, and a lot of that boom was funded on debt. So their attitudes to debt are quite interesting. So we may see that Gen Z are perhaps less thrifty than Gen Alpha are perhaps less thrifty than Gen Z, although the pandemic and cost of living stuff we're going through at the moment may actually counteract this. So we're sort of not sure. And I think it's fair to say that on a lot of these trends, there will be emerging trends, and we're not sort of sure of what's going to happen. But the other thing is millennials are quite engaged parents. So on the whole, so Gen Alpha are quite family orientated, which perhaps is slightly different to generations before and so on. For all the tech, the social media stuff, the climate change and social justice, which Gen Z had, basically just dial that up a notch. They are even more digitally savvy, they're even more socially aware, they're even more sort of influenced and immersed in social media. They are expected to be even more educated than Gen Z was. and even more diverse than Gen Z was, as we can, you know, the sort of migration patterns and mix and all that sort of stuff continues to grow, I guess, and that will only grow as we see the emergence of countries like India and some on the African continent. China becomes more sort of involved. So all of that sort of global influences, they called millennials, I think, the first global generation, just dial that up a notch.
So I'm guessing with that, Dave, that therefore it is definitely worth employers getting to grips with Gen Z, because it's not like it's a short-term flash in the pan. That will then continue even more so with Gen Alpha.
Absolutely. And if you think the top end of Gen Z, Instagram was the thing, right? So millennials was sort of Facebook, then Instagram came out, and that was between millennials and Gen Z, I think. And a TikTok now will span that piece between Gen Z and the beginning part of Gen Alpha. And then who knows what we've got, like guaranteed AI will have an influence on social media somehow. I just don't know how. And it will just be interesting to see how that emerges and what influences that has. But all of that stuff, I think, is synonymous with lots of the stuff in Gen Z anyway. I suppose one of the interesting things will be the pandemic and its aftermath and what impact that will have on this generation. There's evidence to suggest there's actually a pendulum swing away from smartphone and social media addiction and back to being outdoors and sort of that craving. You know, you've been cooped up and it's been the only way to engage. When it's a novelty or when it's balanced with other things, it's almost like that intensive and things like learning taking place online, all their social interaction taking place online. It's there's almost like a reaction to that to say, oh, we just want to get outdoors again. We've been cooped up for 2.5 years. Then now can we interact socially? And you'll see that in things that come out, you know, around more face-to-face employer engagement, where we've gone very digital and virtual. There's definitely a craving for that in schools and universities, which is the back end of Gen Z, as I say. Really quickly, what does this mean? Echo the stuff that's said around diversity, social, environmental impact. They will suss out if you are just talking about it or just making it a token gesture, and it's not truly part of your culture and your employer brand as a result. So they will see beyond stuff, you know. I echo the stuff around TikTok and gaming as platforms to consider. Gaming is an interesting one, whereas perhaps Gen Z and millennials were a little bit more sort of FIFA and Call of Duty type games. Gen Alpha seem to be more creative. Now that may just be their age, you know, but things like Minecraft as a sort of game, they want to sort of create their own worlds rather than existing in a storyline of another, I suppose. Weirdly, audio content is sort of an emerging space where they quite like that as opposed to super visual stuff. So it's still, you know, it's still they're not having to read it, they're not having to sort of actively engage in it, but podcasts and trying to find sort of audio content, it's quite interesting. So they have their headphones in when they're traveling and so on.
Yeah, I rarely see my 14-year-old without. She looks like a DJ most of the time with massive headphones on.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing is with influencers, really careful about who you choose. So have people that connect with your brand values, not just have a big following or because again, they'll see through that in authenticity. I suppose it will feel really odd to them. It'd be like, well, why is Taylor Swift, for example, promoting accountancy? Where's the connection there? So just be careful about those sort of connections. But just really quickly in conclusions, that there's loads of this that's still emerging. Like none of this is set in stone. Echo the stuff around sweeping generalizations across a generation, and absolutely get out and see them and speak to them and talk to them. You'll much, you know, that's the way I can read 1,000 research reports, but getting out and engaging with them. And if that's through Rise, then great. You'll definitely get to chat to some young people through that. Or if it's through other means, then that's great.
Brilliant, David. Great shout out there for Rise. And I mean, I'll add on that Access Accountancy for those employers on the call who are training accountants or employing accountants. Another great initiative to help with social mobility and diversity. And I think a great opportunity to just get that insight. You know, there is nothing like spending time with, whether it's Gen Z, Gen Alpha, spending time with young adults to actually see how they tick, you know, what they're thinking about, what their priorities are. Thank you very much for that, Dave. And that is bringing us to a conclusion this morning. What another fantastic, blimey, very rich discussion, lots of great insights. So thank you very much to our speakers. You know, real mix of different thoughts there, really value their time. We do have a series of further webinars coming up as the year progresses. We're going to be looking at running successful work experience, going to be looking at running successful assessment centres, which I'm sure a lot of employers will be now looking forward to for their next intakes. And as I said, we are going to be doing a lunchtime slot, a lunchtime leadership and learn, looking at managing Gen Z. And I'm wondering whether I might even invite some of our speakers from today back to give their opinions on that one. So yeah, another fantastic session. Thank you very much to our audience. Thank you to Karen and Joe from the ACCA for kicking us off. Thanks to David from Form the Future. Thanks to Tom from Your Future. Thanks to Rachel from the AAT and Dave there from the ICAW for finishing us off. And that takes us to pretty much bang on 10 o'clock. Thank you very much. Another fantastic session. See you all soon. Enjoy the rest of your day.